Let's take a look at plant pigments. A pigment is going to be a colored molecule that we find in plants, and these are going to be found inside the thylakoid membranes, and their job is to absorb light. The first pigment that we've all heard of before is chlorophyll, which is the most abundant pigment that we find, and it is green in color. There are two types of chlorophyll, type A and type B. There are also other accessory pigments called carotenoids, which are a red-orange color, and xanthophylls, which are a yellow color. We can see these pigments if we look at the fall trees and we see all these beautiful colors in the leaves when they change for autumn. What happens is the chlorophyll almost disappears so that the other pigments then become prominent, so we see those colors instead of the green color. The way that we know that we have all these pigments in these plants is through a process called chromatography, sometimes referred to as paper chromatography, which is a process that's used to separate the pigments in a leaf. If we look at this setup here, all right, this setup is actually going to be just kind of a character picture of what we do. We take a piece of paper and we put the plant extract on it. We put it into a solvent, which is nonpolar, and we make sure that the extract isn't actually touching the solvent. Then what happens is the solvent will, through capillary action, move up this chromatography paper, and when it does, then we will separate the pigments out. If we look at the paper over here, we can see that the bottom pigment here is chlorophyll B, which is actually the least soluble, and it's the least nonpolar. Then we have chlorophyll A, which is kind of hard to see. It's kind of this teal color here. Xanthophylls in here, and then we go to the carotenoids. And now these pigments all separate based on their solubility. The most soluble pigments will go all the way to the top, and they are the most nonpolar. Remember, like dissolves like. So nonpolar will dissolve nonpolar. That's why we use a nonpolar solvent. The reason that plants actually look green to us is because green light is reflected. When light hits the leaves, it's actually traveling in red, blue, and green. And these are all used for photosynthesis. But the red and the blue light is actually going to be absorbed by the leaf, whereas the green light, because of that green chlorophyll, is actually reflected. So when it's reflected, that's what we see, and that's why plants appear green. Now if we take a closer look at the two types of chlorophyll, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, we can see that chlorophyll B up here is represented by this light green color, and it peaks, showing that we have a high absorbance in the blue color range. And then it peaks again when we get to these orange colors over here. Remember that, light travels different wavelengths we see in different colors. This is called the visible light spectrum. Chlorophyll A has a peak over here, okay, so it absorbs more of the red light and more of the light towards the, if you go the violet indigo, because we have a peak over here. Remember, if we look at the rainbow, we see Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, G for green, blue, indigo, and violet. So we have Roy G. Biv if we go backwards. These two types of chlorophyll, you can see they absorb at different wavelengths, so they're absorbing different colors, and that's going to help the plant, absorb all that sunlight. Notice, though, that over here in the greens, you see very little absorption because the light is being reflected. And again, that is why leaves appear green to us.